A couple of weeks back, I had the pleasure of hosting Rick Beato here at the Spitfire HQ, Upper Air Studios, and we both interviewed each other. And in my interview of him, we touched on what is a very difficult subject, and that is kind of online digital royalties, namely YouTube and Article 13, which I believe has now become Article 17. So I thought it would be good to maybe find a different opposing or balancing view to where Rick and I were headed within our conversation, and talk to someone who's not only a successful composer but also on the board of directors of PRS, the Performing Rights Society, which is the main collection society here in the UK. So it's my great pleasure and honour to present to you Drew Masters, who you will recognise as a regular contributor to this channel. So my thing, just got to get my questions. Where are they? Where's my phone?
Let's keep this rolling.
Yeah. Such a pro. So my questions, just so you know, I'm not kind of on Grindr whilst interviewing you. I've never kind of gone into this territory on this channel, but it is naturally a really important part of what we do is royalties. I, as you know, have become a YouTube creator, as YouTube would refer to me. And just judging by the reticence of other YouTube creators to use music because of very complicated copyright issues with respect to monetization and getting strikes and all of that kind of stuff, I'm detecting a real reticence of using music, and music that you and I are familiar with creating, which is background music. And as a consequence, I've developed a bit of a paranoia that we're going down the MP3 route again, kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So should we start with like your day job as a composer, and then possibly your involvement with PRS and who PRS are?
So I mean, I've been composing for TV actually a long time. I think I started in the late 80s, and then I sort of went on and off. I got, got into bands and things like that, and got into other things. Did adverts for a while, but it wasn't for me really, so then I sort of just found my footing in factual TV, and then got into drama, which is quite a big jump. We've talked about this before. I think it's quite a jump to go from factual TV into those genres, but that's where I am now, and I'm sort of now pretty much wound down the factual TV stuff I do. You'll still see my name come up on things, but they're legacy things mostly. So like, for example, The Apprentice, I haven't written anything new for it for 5 years, something like that.
And I'm right in saying, because I've done quite a lot of factual as well, that factual is very little money up front. It relies heavily on royalties, and if you get a good franchise, it can be quite...
And that's exactly right. And in the context of the conversation we're having, it's a very good point. So yeah, the fees are in, you know, the couple of thousands to low thousands, and it's not great. It will, you know, when you're starting out and you don't have high outgoings, it's not too bad, but it's, you know, when you get to our age, it's not a living really. You have to do an awful lot. I've usually, you know, it's one of the reasons I've wound down the factual TV is that I was doing 5 to 7 projects at a time, plus some drama, plus some other projects, and it was just exhausting and relentless. It just never ends.
And it can be like 6 months, a year till you see the royalties.
More, because so basically, if you're thinking about a factual project, let's talk about, say, a Channel 4 6-hour. Series about something, you know, kids growing up or something. So you will get commission for that in, say, April when the budgets come in, and you'll be working on that probably till September, something like that. And I tend to structure my fees, so I get an advance, well, I get the first half usually on signing. And then if it's a 6-month project, I'll ask for a quarter halfway through it, so say July, and then another quarter. So let's say this is, you know, £5,000 for a Channel 4 6-hour project, which is common. So you get 2,500 up front. You get another 1,250 in July, and then 1,250 when they finally delivered and the broadcasters agreed it, which will probably be September, October. It will overrun, and then, you know, that's before tax. And then that will go on air probably in January, February. That will get picked up, so that will miss the April distribution from PRS. That will get picked up hopefully in the July one if they put the cue sheets in on time. If it misses that, it's October. So that's like, you know, almost a year and a half between being commissioned to do something and getting the royalties in. That business model works if you've got a lot of, you know, churn.
It is a speculative business model.
Totally, yeah. But then, of course, what happens is you'll be guaranteed your royalties for that TX, so transmission, which is, let's say it's 6 hours on Channel 4. It's not a huge amount of money. You'll probably get, depends how much music they put in the show, but probably let's say 3.5 grand, something like that. So again, it's not huge, and that's coming in October of the year later. Yeah. What then happens is, if it's a show that's very, England, Britain centric, like something about, a local scandal or something like that, or some MP or something, it's probably not going to travel very far. But if it's sort of something about how to bring up your children, then it sells around the world. And so that you're always looking, you've got your eye on that when you're picking your projects. If you're in the luxury position to actually choose your projects, and you're thinking, is this going to sell abroad? Because then what happens is, it gets played all around the world, and some countries don't pay any royalties. Some countries do pay royalties, but they take years to come through, often. Yeah. And some countries don't pay royalties, but then later on they do. And so I've been getting, large sort of like 5 grand chunks come in for a programme that I wrote maybe 10 years ago, that, from somewhere like Denmark, that's doing a retrospective payout for stuff that they weren't previously paying out on.
You've taken this this knowledge, and you're providing an amazing service to the composing community at large by working with PRS, the Performing Rights Society. Do you want to describe your role there and what PRS is?
To get it down to its nuts and bolts, it does licenses, so it's going around negotiating with the likes of the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all these people, Spotify, to give them licenses for which they pay a sum of money, which is generally a blanket agreement, which is then divided up between the writers of all the works that they use during that period. That's complicated enough in itself, so that's a full-time thing. And then it's a collection and distribution company as well. So it collects the money and it distributes it to its members. And because it's a members' society, it doesn't make profit. It has operating costs, and any profit that would normally be given to shareholders, we are the shareholders basically. We are both, as members, we are both the customer and the shareholder. So we get that share.
There's also the shifting sands of modern media. Who was to know that a video delivery company was going to become one of the biggest studios in the world? A book delivery company, likewise. A computer manufacturer would be a big distributor of our content. So, and often what I find with these new media is that often what they're originally designed to do, their end use becomes surprising in respect of Twitter becoming, going from a kind of a teenage toy to something that's bringing down governments. You know.
No, absolutely. And I think, to go back to your point that you made very early on, you talked about shooting ourselves in the foot in the way we did with MP3s. It's the perfect analogy, and I was actually talking about this to someone only this morning. We are in danger of looking at YouTube as the enemy and treating it the same way we did with Napster and MP3s and saying, let's fight it, instead of going, well, hang on, how do we work with them so that we all benefit? What we have to do is take some of the responsibility. So, to give you a concrete example, with Article 13, which is now Article 17, I don't know why they've renumbered it. They just have. I think maybe they didn't like the number 13. It's a European directive, and it's basically, in its essence, it compels platforms like YouTube and others providing for user-generated content that's uploaded to take responsibility for making sure that copyright owners are paid fairly. That's basically its essence. That also covers, that's Article 13, but the various articles in the Copyright Directive also cover things like news and things like that. Okay. So if you're taking someone's news story and using it to as part of your content, they need to be paid for that. It seems fair when you say it like that. It's just that the internet's been a bit of a sort of tree-hugging, caring, sharing, everything's free sort of marketplace. But there's a reason for that, and we've got used to it because companies like Google and Facebook and others have used data as the commodity. And, if you've read any Jaron Laney or people like that, it's all about, we are the product. And their business model is to sell to advertisers and to use our data as the product that they're selling. So it's in their interest to give away stuff for free so that they can harvest the feedback, the data. The things that people were worried about the Save the Internet crowd, were things like the filtering, which puts the onus on companies like YouTube to filter anything that's being uploaded and use music recognition technology to work out what music's being used, and if it's not available to be used because it's owned by someone else, then to strip it out or just to reject the video, the content, whatever it is. But, you know, they were already doing that. So I don't know why everyone was so up in arms about it. I mean, they've been doing it for ages. Yeah. Likewise, SoundCloud and many other platforms. So there are lots of ways we can go about this. I think the wrong way to go about it is to go, YouTube's the enemy, let's stop them from doing anything. That's dumb. I mean, as I say, I love YouTube, it's brilliant. So what we need to do is make sure that all the music that we create is in a database with meta tags, so that when they're using filtering, they can tap into our database, which we need to give them access to, and it will be easy for them to work out what music's on there. Then it won't be a problem. But we need to do that. We need to take responsibility and go, you know, if we want our music paid for, we have to make sure it's registered somewhere. Just like you'd register it with PRS if you want to collect royalties, you also have to, you know, register the actual waveforms with music recognition technology databases. And there are several out there already. There will be more and more, I'm sure. And, you know, a big player will emerge fairly soon. This is something we're doing at PRS.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds amazing for us, but then for me, kind of Jekyll and hiding, for me as a YouTube creator, that sounds to me like it's probably going to come off my cut of the ad revenue.
So YouTube's model is obviously is advertising. So if you have an ad-funded YouTube channel, basically yes, if you're making money from advertising from your content that you've uploaded, if your content contains music that's written by someone else, for which they deserve a royalty, then yes, some of your money that you're making from that advertising should, I think, go to, and some of YouTube's as well, because YouTube are making money. So some of that pot of money should go to the person that's created the stuff that's helping generate that revenue. Seems obvious to me. I mean,
I'm totally split, Drew, to be honest, and I'm not saying that to be polite and say, and like behind your back to go, I don't agree with you. I'm finding it difficult because my feet are I feel like I'm on one of those trains that's the tracks are, because for me, if PewDiePie plays my music behind one of his videos and 15 million people watch it and he credits me and links me on his video, that's kind of all that's enough for me. But then it's kind of the onus is on me to be able to monetize the consequence of that.
I see what you're saying, but I just think that's just too narrow an example. I mean, how many people on YouTube are actually really getting that kind of traction? I mean, right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that may change, but there are, there's a handful of people, PewDiePie, Dan TDM, people like that, but there are, most people aren't getting that kind of, and if you look at what you get for 1 million plays, it's actually not a lot.
No.
So, and there's, getting 1 million plays is quite a lot. Once you get up into the millions, it's great. But, this whole argument about exposure, it's been used many, many times. We've talked about the race to the bottom. If you value music at nothing, then that's what it's worth. So, is a performance, and I mean, this was a question in the early days of what royalties should be for internet, is a performance or not? It's the same thing that comes up with off-peak and peak. It's like, if it's played, does it matter if there are 10 people in the room or 100 people in the room? And we've made a decision that there is, and that it's remunerated proportionally. So if your piece of music is played out to 5 million people on BBC One, you'll get more than if it's played out to 500,000 people at midday, because it's a bigger performance. And so.
But is that not an old-fashioned way of are we not still tapping into a method of being paid that was invented to basically deal with the printing press and sheet music?
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, I've gone over this. I'm probably one of the most open-minded people, certainly at PRS, about this sort of stuff. And I'm with you. I love playing devil's advocate. I love looking at and I love the culture of free on the internet. But the internet's all there is going to be soon. So the traditional broadcasters we know won't exist. Is the royalty method of being paid for our work outmoded? And it's a question that comes up a lot at PRS and in other organisations that I work with and amongst my composer friends. And I think the bottom line is no one's going to pay us more up front. That's the business models are entrenched. So you either take away the royalty model and then you're left with low fees, or no fees if you're a songwriter, probably. You might get a publishing advance or something, but generally you're not going to sell any records. And then what? Then you've got no royalties either, so then you've got to tour. But what if you're an electronica musician or something? You don't want to tour, or you can't tour. For me, the royalty model has existed for a long time. It's been honed and it works. Mm-hmm. It's enshrined in law. It is actually a European human right, amazingly. It's because it's quite...
Glad we're leaving.
Yeah, I know. It's brilliant, isn't it? But it is also a legal right under the Design and Patents Act in the UK. If you talk to broadcasters, production companies, they don't like paying for the royalties, but as a model it works for them. So
just another scenario for you, Drew, which was brought up by Rick Beato, which is fair use. And I think that his thing is, a very interesting argument of, well, he was doing a thing about heavy metal. He wanted to play a bit of Ozzy Osbourne, and they did a copyright strike. So he just removed it from the video and moved along to the next band from Wolverhampton. That if the Beatles aren't on YouTube, do they lose their historical importance? And isn't therefore there an argument, certainly in the realm of education, for fair use?
Well, let's take the Beatles out of the equation, because their music's so great that it's unlikely to lose its cultural relevance, even if it was never played again. I totally agree. I completely agree. I think that there are often occasions when things should be allowed to be used for free. I think what's interesting is moral rights. Moral rights which you waive as a TV composer, but you don't as a songwriter, I think are really important, because I'm going to just take an example. Let's say Coldplay write a song and UKIP decide to use it as their theme tune. I don't know. I'm guessing that Coldplay wouldn't be very happy about that. I have no idea. But
I've met them, and I think it's safe to say.
Rick's doing a fantastic service to musicians everywhere by showing, by teaching them, really simple things, but in really technical things in a simple way. Mm-hmm. Why would you, as a band, would you say, oh no, I don't want my piece of music used in that way?
Well, it's happening in schools. They're not seeking clearance for playing a track in a music class. And as Jordan B. Peterson, whether you hate him or love him, pointed out to his kind of faculty, that he could do a lecture to 30 people in his lecture hall, or he can lecture to 3 million people on YouTube. I think it's a slightly older generation getting their head around that it is an educational tool as well as an entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure that Rick has advertising on his channel. Okay, so going back to what we said at the beginning, there is an argument. He shouldn't be prevented from using anything, but if there is an advertising revenue and he's playing the actual track, there is an argument that he's making money from that, that's his livelihood possibly, then the artist should get a bit. But if he's playing a 20-second snippet, it's not going to be a lot of money. It's going to be in the low cents or points of a cent. So we're not talking about a lot of money. It's about, what Article 13 and now Article 17 is about fairness. So it's not saying, if you make $1 in advertising revenue and you've got a bit of background music, that person should get half of it. It's about it. All it says is, if you're using some background music and that's helping you to promote what you're doing and make money, they should get something that's fair.
That's interesting, because actually what's currently happening, certainly on YouTube from what I can see, is certainly for the very big creators who've got the big followings, people are actually searching for use so that they can just basically claim the AdSense royalty in totality. So basically, you lose the revenue.
Yeah, and I think that's because there's no clarity of licensing. And I think it would benefit everyone. It would benefit YouTube as much as it would benefit and other platforms just as much as it would benefit the writers if there was just some clarity. And I think that whilst Article 13, 17 is not perfect, it goes a really long way to doing that. It sets out some ground rules, which are still fairly open to interpretation. And there have been some really great concessions put in there, really big concessions to Google, and to memes are excluded. If you think about what a meme is, if you've got a little GIF, an animated GIF of Deadpool, for example, in what way is that not copyright infringement? In what way should someone not be rewarded for that? But the fact is, it's been excluded because it's a bit of fun. And honestly, how would you how would you value that? Wikis are excluded. So Wikipedia, very disingenuously, had that whole thing last year when we were trying to lobby for Article 13 to go through, and they took the whole of Wikipedia down. I don't know if you remember, for a day or something, and then they kept putting things up saying, please save the internet, save Wikipedia. They knew full well they were excluded. They were always excluded. Yeah. It would benefit everyone if we just got some nice simple licenses in place and some rules. And I think this is the sort of forum in which we can help come up with these ideas. And I think fair use is absolutely right.
I guess one of the things I'm getting, to follow your tack, which I very much agree with, is if we don't value our music, people aren't going to value it on our behalf. I guess if we don't promote the value of good music, of great music, of human music, then people aren't going to promote it on our behalf. Most of you wouldn't have seen this, but there's a gardening program called Ground Force, isn't it?
I would never watch that.
No, but
sure
but what's very interesting is it's. If you watch it with the sound down, Ground Force, compared to another gardening show on British television, they look identical. But you get a sense that Ground Force is of a slightly higher quality, and that's because they use live brass band music. And it just adds to the perceived production value. Something like Antiques Roadshow begins with a string quartet. Yeah. And I think it's educating about the power of human music and not kind of algorithm created or arpeggiators.
And that's why when you do factual TV, there's no budgets, and they just give you, they expect you to do everything electronically, which is where, tools like the Spitfire libraries are amazing, because, they've allowed me to do, fairly convincing orchestral music for no money. Now, that's another argument that, is that a good thing? It's helped enormously. It's helped my career enormously.
Well, it keeps, in my mind, it keeps orchestral music legitimate, and they are earning lots of royalties.
But it's also proved my ability to write orchestral music, which has then led on to me working with orchestras. And now the same musicians who are in the library, so it's great. But then you get into drama, they would very rarely, it does happen, but very rarely would a drama encourage you to use fake strings. They would expect, they pay more, and they'd expect you to spend some of that money using real players, because they know it adds value, they know it sounds better. And with a film score, likewise, you'd never, they would just, they'd be horrified if you said, I'm just doing it all with samples.
And directors, you're never going to be upset by the idea of working with them. I guess
so it's valued.
Absolutely, it is valued, and I think that the point here also, because there was a point where it wasn't. I remember there were some pretty awful James Bond movie scores where in the kind of early 90s. But I think that what's happened and happens with technology is it becomes dominant for a while, and then it just becomes another technology.
Yeah.
And we go through it, just like I remember kind of again in the 80s, it was like it's all going to be about ready meals. Why would you want to cook anymore? Yeah. Turns out, that's a good.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think I honestly have no feelings of despair about the music industry at all. I've been through it and I've come out the other side. I genuinely think, I also read a lot of technology books, a lot of sort of Silicon Valley books, and we are going to automate a lot more stuff, including the creation of art. But I just don't, that time that will be freed up by robots and AI doing stuff like legal contracts and, cataract operations and whatever else, is going to free us up to be more creative.
I've got just two more scenarios. One is a Mad Max apocalyptic one, which is if the PR is done badly on this, and we do find that creatives are de-incentivized to use good, well-made music, and instead switch to the royalty-free kind of models. And I'm generalising, but largely it's kind of made by the pound. It's like sausage meat.
Yeah.
Are we not creating an environment, which I imagine the tech giants would probably quite enjoy, whereby suddenly AI music sounds kind of halfway okay? It's just it's something that maybe our kids are getting used to. I mean, I listen to the quality of music my kids are absorbing through YouTube, and it is largely awful. Are we not creating an environment where HAL gets to take over?
Possibly. I mean, I think the area of AI music is worrying for composers because it will, I mean, it's already happening. It will happen more and more. It will get better and better. And there will be a time where it will be good enough for a lot of things. I think that people will always gravitate towards real quality. I think that people will want to create things and therefore will find a way to make that monetizable, because we'll have to. So I think that I think these things are all symbiotic. I don't think you can't crush creativity because there's not enough money in it, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I think it's a human.
It's a very basic human desire to be creative. I mean, it's really interesting having kids, and you'll know this. If you ask my kids what they want to do, they'll go, can we do some drawing, or can we do some finger painting, or can we make some broomsticks, or can we do, they want to make stuff. Nobody goes, I really want to do some like really deep accounting.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah.
And what people tend to do is take what is quite boring tech, a cloud hosting service for what was originally low grade videos.
Yeah.
And turn it into something pretty sensational, and you kind of craft an art form.
And so, people will need still to eat, and so they will find a way of monetizing. A lot of people are moaning at the moment about, the erosion of this or the erosion of that, either fees, royalties, whatever it is. I think something that we have to remember as composers, and I know that you're always talking about this sort of thing, is that we are businesses, and most businesses evolve. They follow the money. If the money dries up in one sector, they evolve into a different sector. You can't just stay put. And we don't really do that. We go, well, we're creatives, we write music. We're not business. We don't think, if the money goes, we just complain about it. We don't, or campaign to get more. So, for example, right now, there's more money in mechanicals than there is in
because mechanicals
performance.
are streaming, is that correct?
Well, mechanicals effectively the artist's royalty.
Right.
It's more complex than that, but if you think of it, so if you think about when something's streamed on Spotify, for example, who I see have just got to 100 million paid subscribers, which is very good, that royalty that they pay is split into mechanical and performance. Performance goes to the writer, or writers, and the mechanical go to the artist. Now, the artist is often the writer, but often they're not. So at the moment, that pot is not split evenly. It's in favour of the artist. It's something that we're trying to negotiate at PRS because we think they should be equal. I mean,
what's been known as favoured nation?
Yeah. So what's more important, the song or the artist? I mean, if it was the artist, then how come so many artists release a cover first to gain traction? I mean, we would argue that they're equally important. But at the moment, you get more money from mechanicals on that platform and similar platforms. So therefore, what do? Do you go, oh, well, there's no money in being a writer, so I'll just be A, poor, or B, give up? Or you can just go, well, okay, so I'll make some albums and I'll release my stuff. Instead of doing my soundtracks for BBC and Channel 4 or whatever, I'll do those, but I'll put them out as albums with me as the artist and then hope they get picked up on Spotify playlists and things like that. Spotify's huge for TV and film music now. In fact, all the production libraries I'm talking to, they're all putting their music on Spotify because they're getting into playlists just as well as commercial songs.
Well, because people are accessing, to use the horrific Apple thing, the soundtrack of your lives, people are soundtracking their lives.
Yeah.
I think that this is what's created a resurgence in instrumental music.
Totally, yeah. And there's a huge market for piano music, and there's just enormous new markets emerging, which are great. So there is an element of, we're creators first. We have to follow our hearts in terms of what we do. But that doesn't mean we can't also then monetize it and be a business and go, well, there's more money doing this, so how do I do what I love, but in that context? And If you don't do that, that's fine. But you know, if the money dries up in one area, that's it. I think you have to accept that that's true for all businesses.
Well, but Paul, he was really big in advertising, and then it very suddenly dried up, and he just had to move along. Yeah. So I guess that's the moral of the story, really, is the more suspicious you are about these new avenues, the greater risk it possibly poses to you as and when that reservoir dries up.
Any platform that allows your work to be used as the enemy has got to be the wrong attitude, hasn't it? Absolutely. You've got to learn, you've got to find a way to make it work for you. If that means just setting up your own channel and putting your music out there and, using advertising to monetize it, that's it. In PRS, we're sitting down, every meeting talking about these things, and it's constantly on our minds. And as I say, we are using the new technologies that are out there now to see how we can make sure that everything, the main thing I think is just to make sure that all the works are registered in big databases so that we know what's being used. That's the most important thing, because at the moment, we don't know what's being used where, and it's very difficult to actually find out.
So there is hope that we have to be...
I think there's always hope. I think that, I don't see a world without creators until all the humans have been wiped out, which might not be that long.
Drew, thanks ever so much. That's brilliant.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Drew, for this amazingly valuable discussion, and it's really got me thinking. Where I sit on this, everyone is trying to do the right thing. There seems to me is a lot of untested systems that we still need to put into place. Where Drew has changed my mind is the PewDiePie reference I mentioned earlier. I do think he's right. I do think if we don't put a value on it, how do people value something? If you give something for free, they think it's a free thing. If you say this is worth £2, but you can have it for free, they feel that you've given them £2. It's a complicated situation, but I do really thank Drew for his input, for his time, and for having a very positive view about the need always for humans to create music. It's not something we want to be replaced, so therefore probably won't. If you have any thoughts about this, I'd really like to hear your opinions down in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed yet, lots more fascinating content like this coming up. And if you want to be notified the next time I put a video up, ding that bell. One of these would be much appreciated in thanks for Drew's contribution. See you next time.